My name is Kelly, and I married Tom when I was young and full of dreams. We'd been high school sweethearts, and I thought we'd be happy forever. My father, a successful businessman who owned a furniture factory, gave us a beautiful house as a wedding gift. 3 years after the wedding, our son Michael was born. As the years passed, I threw myself into being the perfect housewife and mother. I kept our home spotless, cooked gourmet meals, and made sure Michael had everything he needed. Tom's career as a sales manager wasn't progressing as quickly as he'd hoped. One night, he came home frustrated and angry. "Damn it, Kelly. I can't take this anymore. I'm busting my ass at work, and for what? Pennies." He slammed his fist on the kitchen table, making me jump. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Tom's eyes lit up. "Your father. He could give me a job at his factory. A senior position. You could talk to him, couldn't you?" I hesitated. My father had always been fair in his business dealings, and I didn't want to take advantage of our relationship. But seeing the desperation in Tom's eyes, I nodded. "Okay, I'll talk to him." The next day, I visited my father at his office. "Dad, I need to ask you something," I began nervously. "It's about Tom. He's not happy with his job, and I was wondering if you might have a position for him here at the factory?" After a long moment, my father nodded. "All right, I'll give him a shot. But he'll have to prove himself like anyone else." When I told Tom the news, he was ecstatic. He picked me up and spun me around the kitchen. "You're amazing, Kelly. This is going to change everything for us." And for a while, it did. Tom started earning more money, and our financial worries eased. But as one problem faded, another grew in its place: my relationship with Tom's mother, Helen. Helen was a force of nature, fiercely protective of her only son and openly disapproving of me. She'd drop by unannounced, criticize my housekeeping, and demand my constant attention. One afternoon, as I was trying to get dinner ready, Helen burst through the front door. "Kelly, I need you to take me shopping right now." I gritted my teeth. "Helen, I'm in the middle of cooking. Can it wait until tomorrow?" Her eyes narrowed. "Are you saying my needs aren't important? After all I've done for this family?" I bit back a retort, knowing it would only make things worse. "Of course not. Just give me a few minutes to finish up here." As I drove Helen to the mall, listening to her complaints about my driving, my cooking, and pretty much everything else, I couldn't help but wonder how my life had become this way. I was an intelligent, capable woman, yet here I was, catering to everyone else's whims while my own dreams gathered dust. One particularly frustrating afternoon, Helen barged into our home unannounced, as usual. "Kelly," she called out, her voice grating on my already frayed nerves. "I'm hungry. Make me something to eat." Biting my tongue, I set aside the laundry and trudged to the kitchen. As I prepared a meal for Helen, she sat at the kitchen table, criticizing my every move. "You're using too much oil," she snapped. "And for heaven's sake, cut those vegetables smaller. Don't you know how to cook properly?" As I placed the finished meal in front of her, I hoped she'd eat quickly and leave. But to my dismay, she packed up all the food I'd prepared and stood up. "I'll be taking this with me," she announced. "I have bridge club tonight, and this will do nicely for snacks." I stared at her in disbelief. "But Helen, that was supposed to be our dinner." "Oh, you can always make more," she said, already heading for the door. "It's not like you have anything better to do with your time." As the door slammed behind her, I sank into a chair, feeling defeated. I glanced at the clock, realizing I now had less than an hour to prepare another meal before Tom got home from work. When Tom arrived, he found me frantically trying to get dinner on the table. "What's going on?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Why isn't dinner ready?" I explained what had happened with his mother, hoping for some understanding or support. Instead, Tom's face darkened. "Mom was here, and you didn't make her feel welcome?" he demanded. "Kelly, you know how important family is to me. You should have been more accommodating." Accommodating? I echoed, incredulous. Tom, she took our dinner. She treats me like a servant in my own home. Tom shook his head, clearly annoyed. You're exaggerating. Mom just wants to feel loved and appreciated. Is that too much to ask? As we ate the hastily prepared meal in silence, I couldn't help but feel a growing distance between us. Tom, once my high school sweetheart and closest confidant, now felt like a stranger across the dinner table. One evening, Tom came home from work in a foul mood. His face was red with anger as he slammed the front door behind him. Kelly, he bellowed. Your father is a tyrant, a despot. He humiliates people and uses them like pawns in his little game. I was taken aback. My father had always been fair and kind in my experience. What happened? I asked cautiously. Tom's eyes flashed with fury. I stood up for an employee today. Your father was treating him unfairly, and I couldn't stand by and watch. And you know what your precious daddy did? He fired me on the spot. My mind reeled. This didn't sound like my father at all. There must be some mistake, I said. Let me talk to Dad and hear his side. No, Tom roared, causing me to flinch. You will not speak to your father. You will not speak to your mother. As far as we're concerned, they no longer exist for us. Do you understand? Trembling, I nodded, too shocked and scared to argue further. In the days that followed, Tom found another job. He started earning well again, but the incident had changed something fundamental in our relationship. The warmth and love I once felt for him was replaced by fear and resentment. Years passed, and our son Michael grew up. He often asked about his grandparents, but Tom would shut down any conversation about them. You have one grandmother, he would say firmly. My mother. That's all you need to know. As Michael prepared to leave for college in another city, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. My baby was growing up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing the only ally I had in this house. Over the next few years, my life fell into a monotonous routine. I catered to Tom's every whim and endured Helen's constant criticism. Without Michael as a buffer, their treatment of me grew even more oppressive. One afternoon, as I was scrubbing the kitchen floor under Helen's watchful eye, the phone rang. I reached for it, but Helen snatched it away. I'll answer it, she snapped. You focus on getting that floor clean. I can still see spots. I gritted my teeth and returned to my task, but I couldn't help overhearing Helen's side of the conversation. Yes, this is the residence of Kelly. Who? Her father? Helen's voice dripped with disdain. I'm sorry, but Kelly isn't available to speak with you. Please don't call again. My head snapped up. Wait, I called out, but Helen had already hung up the phone. That was your father, she said coldly. I told him not to contact you again. You should be thanking me for protecting this family from those toxic people. I felt a surge of anger and frustration. You had no right to do that, I said, my voice shaking. He's my father. I should have been allowed to speak to him. Helen's eyes narrowed. You ungrateful little. Just then, Tom walked in. What's going on here? He demanded. Helen immediately put on a hurt expression. Oh, Tom, your wife is being so disrespectful to me. After all I do for this family. Tom turned to me, his face dark with anger. Is this true, Kelly? Are you disrespecting my mother? I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. I realized with a sinking heart that it didn't matter what I said. Tom would always take Helen's side. A year passed since that fateful phone call from my father. Life continued its suffocating routine, with Tom and Helen's control over me growing tighter by the day. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. The phone rang while I was preparing breakfast. Tom was in the shower, and Helen hadn't arrived for her daily inspection of my housekeeping. For once, I was able to answer without interference. Hello? I said tentatively. Kelly? Is that you? The voice on the other end was familiar, yet distant, my father's voice. "Kelly, it's your mother. She's very ill. The doctors, they don't think she has much time left. She needs you. We both do." Just then, I heard the bathroom door open. Tom would be down any minute. "I'll try, Dad. I promise I'll try," I whispered before quickly hanging up. When Tom entered the kitchen, I was fighting to compose myself. "Who was that on the phone?" he asked suspiciously. I took a deep breath. It was my father. "My mother is very ill, Tom. She's dying. I need to go see her." Tom's face hardened. "Absolutely not. We've been through this, Kelly. Your parents don't exist for us anymore." I felt something snap inside me. For the first time in years, I stood up to him. "I'm going, Tom. With or without your permission. She's my mother, and I won't let her die without saying goodbye." Tom's jaw clenched. "Fine. One day. That's all you get. And then you come back home where you belong." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. One day was better than nothing. With shaking hands, I called my son Michael and told him what was happening. To my surprise and relief, he immediately offered to accompany me. The next morning, Michael and I set off for my childhood home. When we arrived, my father met us at the door. He looked older than I remembered, grief etching deep lines in his face. Without a word, he pulled me into a tight embrace. He led us to my mother's room. She lay in bed, pale and frail, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Kelly," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "My baby girl." I rushed to her side, clasping her hand in mine. "Mom, I'm here. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" She smiled weakly. "There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. I'm just glad you're here now." We spent the day by her bedside, sharing memories and making up for lost time. As the sun began to set, my mother's breathing became labored. She squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes. "Kelly," she said softly. "Promise me you'll live your life. Really live it. Don't let anyone cage your spirit again." Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "I promise, Mom. I promise." She smiled one last time, then closed her eyes. Her hand went limp in mine. She was gone. Suddenly, my phone began to ring incessantly. I knew without looking that it was Tom. I answered the call, moving to the hallway for privacy. Tom's voice, sharp with anger, cut through the line. "Where the hell are you, Kelly? You were supposed to be back hours ago." "Tom, I can't leave yet," I stammered, my voice thick with emotion. "My mother just passed away. I need to stay for the funeral." "Absolutely not," he roared. "I told you one day, and that's all you get. If you're not back by tomorrow, don't bother coming back at all." His words hung in the air, a threat and a promise all at once. For a moment, I was tempted to give in, to rush back to the life I knew. But then I remembered my mother's last words, urging me to live my life fully. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm staying." I ended the call before he could respond, my heart pounding. I had just defied Tom for the first time in our married life, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and preparations. On the day of the funeral, as we stood solemnly around my mother's grave, my phone began to ring again. Tom's number flashed on the screen. Without thinking, I pressed the speaker button, if only to quickly silence it. Tom's voice, loud and angry, burst forth for all to hear. "Kelly, this is your last chance," he yelled. "If you don't come home right now, I swear I'll come and drag you back myself. You ungrateful filth, after everything I've done for you." I quickly ended the call, my face burning with shame and anger. The mourners around us looked shocked, and Michael's face was a mask of fury. My father looked more concerned than anything else. He pulled me aside as soon as the service was over. "Kelly," he said gently, "we need to talk." We walked to a quiet corner of the cemetery, and my father took a deep breath. "Sweetheart, there's something you need to know about Tom. Something I should have told you years ago." I listened in stunned silence as my father revealed the truth about why Tom had really left the company all those years ago. It wasn't because he had stood up for an employee. It was because my father had caught him stealing money from the company and clients, manipulating prices, and pocketing the difference. "I fired him to protect the company and our clients," my father explained. "I didn't tell you because I thought you loved him, and I didn't want to come between you. But now, hearing how he speaks to you, seeing what your life has become, I can't stay silent anymore." I felt as if the ground had opened up beneath my feet. All these years, I had believed Tom's lies, allowed him to cut me off from my family, endured his and Helen's emotional abuse. And it had all been based on a lie. "There's more," my father continued, his voice grave. "I recently heard from a friend that Tom's company is under investigation. There are discrepancies, Kelly. I think he might be up to his old tricks again." As the full impact of his words hit me, I felt a strange mix of despair and liberation. The life I had known was crumbling around me, but from its ashes, I saw a chance for a new beginning. The day after the funeral, my father, Michael, and I decided to return to my house. To our surprise, we found the house bustling with activity. Helen's friends were milling about, and the smell of food wafted from the open windows. We walked in to find a full-blown party in progress. Helen, holding a glass of wine, spotted us first. Her eyes narrowed as she took in my father and Michael. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're late, Kelly. My birthday celebration started hours ago." I was momentarily stunned. In all the turmoil of the past few days, I had completely forgotten about Helen's birthday. Before I could respond, she thrust a dirty rag into my hands. "Don't just stand there," she snapped. "Start cleaning up. These tables won't wipe themselves." My father, who had been silently observing, suddenly erupted. "How dare you speak to my daughter that way?" he thundered, causing the room to fall silent. "She's not a dog to follow your commands. She's a grown woman who deserves respect." Helen laughed derisively. "Respect? She gave up any right to respect when she married my son. Her family is Tom and me now. You're nothing to her anymore." I watched in disbelief as my father and Helen argued, their voices rising. The party guests looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to leave or stay. Suddenly, Tom burst into the room. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes locking onto me. "Kelly, why aren't you serving the guests? And what are they doing here?" He gestured angrily towards my father and Michael. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "No, Tom," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I'm not serving anyone. I'm not cleaning up. And I'm not staying silent anymore." The room had gone deathly quiet. Even Helen seemed at a loss for words. "I know the truth, Tom," I continued, pulling out the divorce papers I had hastily prepared. "I know why you really left my father's company. And I'm done. I want a divorce." For a moment, Tom looked like he might lunge at me. But then, perhaps realizing he was outnumbered, he deflated. "Fine," he snarled. "Take your divorce. But don't think you'll get a penny from me." I couldn't help but laugh. "This house is mine, Tom. My father gave it to us as a wedding gift, remember? You're the one who needs to leave." Tom and Helen left shortly after, shooting venomous glares our way. As the door closed behind them, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Michael, who had been quietly observing everything, finally spoke up. "Mom, why didn't you tell me things were so bad?" "I'm sorry, Michael," I said. "I thought I was protecting you. But I realize now that I was just teaching you the wrong lessons about love and respect." In the weeks that followed, my life transformed dramatically. The divorce proceedings began, and I threw myself into rebuilding my life. My father, true to his word, stood by me every step of the way. One afternoon, as we sat in his study discussing the future, my father broached a subject I hadn't expected. "Kelly," he began, his voice gentle but serious, "I've been thinking. I'm not getting any younger, and the factory needs new blood. How would you feel about coming to work with me?" I blinked in surprise. "Me? But Dad, I don't know anything about running a business." He chuckled. "Neither did I when I started. You're smart, Kelly. You can learn. Besides, it's about time you had a chance to spread your wings." Over the next few months, I immersed myself in learning the business. My father was a patient teacher, guiding me through the intricacies of running a furniture factory. I discovered a passion for design and innovation that I never knew I had. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings dragged on. Tom, true to form, fought me every step of the way. He contested the ownership of the house, and even attempted to turn Michael against me. In the end, justice prevailed. I was awarded the house and substantial financial compensation for years of emotional abuse. Tom, facing charges for his fraudulent activities, found himself deep in debt and unable to hold senior positions anymore. As for Helen, she faded into the background, her influence over my life finally broken. The last I heard, she had moved in with a distant relative, her social circle diminished after the truth about Tom came out. 3 years passed in what felt like a blink of an eye. Then, one sunny morning, my father called me into his office. His face was solemn as he gestured for me to sit. "Kelly," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I'm not well. The doctors, they don't think I have much time left." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Dad, no," I whispered, reaching for his hand. He squeezed my fingers gently. "It's okay, sweetheart. I've had a good life. And now, I can go knowing that you're strong, that you're free, that you'll be okay." Tears streamed down my face as he continued. "I'm leaving everything to you, Kelly. The business, the house, all of it. You've more than proven yourself. I know you'll take good care of it all." In the weeks that followed, we spent as much time together as possible. My father's condition deteriorated rapidly, but his spirit remained strong. He passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy that I was now responsible for carrying forward. The news of my father's passing and my inheritance spread quickly through our small town. I was still adjusting to my new reality when an unexpected visitor arrived at my doorstep. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I heard the doorbell ring. Opening the door, I was shocked to see Tom standing there, a bouquet of flowers in his hand and an apologetic look on his face. "Kelly," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "I'm so sorry about your father. May I come in?" Warily, I stepped aside to let him enter. We stood in the foyer, an awkward silence hanging between us. Finally, Tom spoke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Kelly. About us, about our life together. I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I've changed. My mother, she passed away last month. She was the one who always came between us. Now, there's nothing stopping us from being happy together again." As I opened my mouth to respond, I heard the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. A moment later, the front door opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man walked in. "Kelly, darling, I'm home," he called out, then stopped short when he saw Tom. Tom looked between us, confusion and anger dawning on his face. "Who the hell is this?" he demanded. The man stepped forward, extending his hand to Tom. "I'm David, Kelly's husband. And you are?" Tom ignored the outstretched hand, his face contorting with rage. "Husband? What the hell, Kelly? You remarried? You traitor!" David's expression hardened. He stepped between Tom and me, his voice low and dangerous. "I suggest you leave now, and never speak to my wife that way again." Tom lunged forward, but David was quicker. He caught Tom by the arm and firmly escorted him to the door. "This is your only warning," David said calmly. "Stay away from Kelly. If you ever come near her or insult her again, you'll regret it." With that, he shut the door in Tom's face. As the sound of screeching tires faded away, David turned to me, his face softening with concern. "Are you okay, love?" I nodded, stepping into his embrace. "I'm fine. I'm just glad you're home." I looked up at him, a smile playing on my lips. "And I'm glad you waited for me after all these years." David chuckled, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "I've loved you since high school, Kelly. I would have waited forever if I had to." As we stood there in each other's arms, I marveled at how life had come full circle. David and I had been high school sweethearts before Tom came into the picture. After my divorce, we had reconnected, and our old feelings had blossomed anew. We'd married in a quiet ceremony 6 months ago, starting a new chapter in both our lives. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Michael. "Mom, great news. Jessica's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." In the months that followed, life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Michael and his wife Jessica moved back to our city, eager to be close to family as they prepared for their baby's arrival. They joined us at the factory, bringing fresh ideas and energy to the business.